Welcome to Echoes of My Imagination. My name is Tracy Lee. Sit back, relax. Let me tell you a story. Today's story is called The Lost Currents of Atlantis and Mu, written by Tracy Thompson. In the ancient long noon of Earth, Mu lived in quiet harmony with the planet's living pulse, until the builders of Atlantis, guided by the mysterious architects, severed that current and set their great stone empire on the slow path to ruin. Let's get into it. Prelude. The air hung thick, golden and heavy, pressing against the skin like water. Every breath was felt in the bones, every pulse carried the hum of the earth itself. In the basin of Mu, the land curved gently toward the horizon, rivers of molten minerals gleaming beneath the moss and ferns. The world had existed for billions of years, yet Mu, this vast pressurized land, had thrived for 800,000. Time had no meaning here. The long noon stretched for hundreds of millennia. There were no harsh seasons, no winter or summer droughts. Years were measured in pulses, the steady thrum of the core beneath their feet. The endless pulse of charged atmosphere pressed the sky close to the land. The air was thick, sweet with the smell of wet minerals, the sharp tang of copper and iron, and a faint musky scent of the living, pulsing and humming in unison. There were no individuals. They were harmonics, the perfect receivers of Earth's voice. To stand on Mu's soil was to feel the heartbeat of the world beneath your feet, an electric pulse steady and deep, vibrating through blood and bone. The Lemurians were not solid in the way humans are now. They were fluid, their bones a liquid lattice of flesh and mineral, constantly shifting, flexing and pulsing in harmony with the Earth's subtle heartbeat. Their bodies shimmered faintly, silica-rich skeletons compressing and extending like water trapped in crystalline cages. The blood glimmered faintly, a liquid lattice of monoatomic gold and silver, carrying currents of energetic consciousness, casting tiny ripples of light beneath the translucent skin. Every pulse was a visible rhythm that aligned with the planet's own. Eyes were not mere lenses. Each eye was a crystalline sphere that received frequency and vibration directly, seeing not shapes but essence, an object's heat, electricity, and density all at once. There was no need to focus, no lenses, only understanding. When a Lemurian moved, they did not walk alone. They flowed as a group. A wave pulled through the dense, pressurized air like a school of fish. Movement, speech, thought, they all rippled outward, shared across bodies and across tribes. To move was to flow as one. Across the flatlands, a dozen adults rose from their mineral beds and shifted together. The lead Lemurian parted the thick air, creating a vacuum that drew others into the slipstream, causing the dense air to bend around them. To the untrained eye, it looked like a dance, like a flock of massive birds guiding in a synchrony only nature could choreograph. The land itself fed them. Each Lemurian had a root site, a patch of mineral-rich clay where the skin drew nutrients directly from the earth. Metabolism was total. Nothing became waste. Whatever was unused seeped through the skin as fragrant oils, feeding mosses and ferns beneath their feet. Mu was alive in every layer. Every movement, every thought, every pulse of the Lemurians reverberated through the sky, earth, and sea. There was no danger, no scarcity, no desire for power. There was only the perfect rhythm of life. Chapter 1. The ground squished pleasantly beneath their knees as the Lemurian children buried themselves in the metallic clay, their legs disappearing into the wet, mineral-rich mud. The mud smelled sweet and metallic, like copper coins left in rain. A slight shimmer rose from the skin as the minerals seeped into the bloodstream, a faint glow that danced along arms and shoulders. From the ridge above, a mother watched her children, her eyes crystalline and faceted, catching every flicker of light, every movement of the water around them. She smiled. The children were pulsing in harmony with her own field, their blood chemistry mirroring hers after long hours of shared embrace. "Feel it? Yes?" One Lemurian said, his chest pulsing in a pattern into the heavy air. Another's skin vibrated in response, receiving the pressure phonic message. Lemurians did not just hear words. They felt the meaning and intent within them, all in a single pulse that rolled across the skin. Mu was the heart, the planet a machine. The northern crown, Hyperborea, was the brain. The Indian Ocean, Kumari Kandam, the hands. Life in Mu was liquid, flowing, connected to the pulse of the earth. The 12 high tribes each held a function. The Hyperboreans, almost white gold, translucent to the core, regulated planetary rotation through stillness and calculation. Kumari Kandam, dark obsidian-skinned, sang to the plants until fruits became tools of vision or strength. Proto-Atlantean outposts on the Atlantic shelf experimented with separation, inventing stone capacitors to store energy for a time when movement might be restricted. Agartha beneath the crust maintained the inner flow, ensuring minerals reached the surface without obstruction. Above them, the sky canopy shimmered, a thick ocean of plasma. Bioluminescent beings floated on massive slabs of pumice-infused geo-islands that drew nutrients from the lightning-rich plasma. These atmospheric weavers directed clouds with long crystalline horns, sending rolling pulses of sound that guided the rainfall, the wind, the pulse of every leaf across the basin. The hum of their horns was the first thing a Lemurian sensed in the morning, a low resonant chord that set the day in motion. The great gliders above shifted lazily in the thick sky. With wingspans longer than a house, they rose effortlessly, their translucent feathers catching the electrical hum of the air. Below, the mineral mammals plodded slowly, skin heavy with encrusted metals, grounding the electrical field of the forest. Even the rivers were not mere water. They were thick, mineral-laden conduits of energy, flowing in spirals that mirrored the spin of the planet itself. And somewhere, hidden in the shadows, a 6-limbed predator crept, invisible to the eye, but utterly present in the pulse. The Lemurians moved through all of this like currents, their skin thick and luminous, catching the subtle glimpse of airborne ions. They walked barefoot, feeling the vibrations beneath them, sensing the push and pull of the earth's heartbeat. Deep beneath the surface, the lithic custodians worked in their crystalline cathedrals, their bodies dense. Quartz and amethyst-lined walls pulsed softly with piezoelectric light, illuminating tunnels miles wide. Heat rivers of molten mineral flowed like ribbons of molten glass, and the custodians guided them with precision, ensuring the earth's pulse reached every corner of the surface. Their eyes glimmered red gold, tuned to every shift in mineral and thermal flux. Deep in the oceans, the ethereal mariners, amphibious engineers, whose velvet-like skin absorbed the minerals from the rich pressurized water, swam through trenches that ran like arteries to the core, their large, glowing eyes catching the faintest electric pulse from creatures hundreds of feet away. The ethereal mariners grew massive, spiraling towers from the calcium-rich water, forming habitats that thrummed with the flow of heat from the smokers, the volcanic vents that kept the seas warm from bottom to surface. Even the creatures of the oceans were part of the network. Leviathans swam through magnetic lines on the sea floor, gathering charge in their skin and releasing it into the water when they breached, creating arcs of energy that linked ocean, land, and sky. Glass reefs grew in patterns of light, their silica fibers transmitting data across entire basins, like a living internet made of crystal and water. The cloud trees of Mu stretched high into the ether strata, roots sunk deep into the mineral-laden beds. Shafts from the depths carried warm, pulsed minerals to the surface pools. Life was a living circuit. Adventure was woven into the pulse itself. Children who strayed too far would feel the tug of the field and be pulled gently back into the safety of the group. Explorers traversed the circuits, climbing cloud trees into the violet breath of the ether strata, or ventured into caverns where piezoelectric crystals pulsed, light ebbing and flowing in the darkness. Humor was everywhere. A child nudged by a playful mineral mammal, a Lemurian's pulse tickling another's skin in a joke that traveled as a vibration. Even the predators, masters of the pulse, occasionally participated in play, a flicker of electrical mischief dancing across a tail or paw. Mu was not just alive, it was aware. In Mu, life was a single flowing organism, each species a limb, each person a vessel of the Earth's pulse. And for 800,000 years, that rhythm had flowed, unbroken, uninterrupted. It was a world that breathed, pulsed, and thought, not with one mind, but with 100 layers intertwined. Mu had no rulers, no wars, no need for currency. It was a machine, but one of flesh, water, stone, and plasma. A machine older than anything the Lemurians could imagine, yet as immediate as a warmth in their veins. But this harmony was fragile. Change was coming. Not from Mu itself, not from the pulse. Somewhere, in the higher ridges at the edge where the mountains jutted high into the air, were the hardened plateaus that would one day bear the name Atlantis. Here, a group of humans drawn to ambition rather than harmony studied the pulse, not as something to join, but something to control. Their hands were hard, their hearts seeking mastery. These were the ancestors of Atlantis, the first to harden themselves against the earth, the first to think in structures instead of rhythms. And so the balance began to tilt, ever so slightly. The pulse of Mu was still strong, still radiant, still alive. But in the shadows of the high ridges, something was learning to take it apart, to turn life itself into a tool. Chapter 2. Mu's timeline stretched across many thousands of years. Time was measured by the pulse of the Earth's core, by the violet breath of the atmosphere. Days were measured in rhythms, in the vibration of mineral veins. Their world was static perfection, a cycle of growth, absorption, and harmonized motion. The megafauna reflected this order. Great bioluminescent gliders moved through thermal streams, stirring heat into the violet air with giant translucent wings. Mineral mammals stabilized the ground electrically, and six-limbed predators pruned excess life without killing the system. Everything was functional, alive, and integral. Trade did not exist as commerce, but as exchange of essence. A tribe from a copper plateau might meet another tribe in a magnesium valley to touch hands, exchanging the feel and pulse of their lands. Crystals, seeds, and plants carried instructions for life, literally transmitting the environmental consciousness of one place to another. Visitors from higher stars moved through the violet-charged atmosphere with ease. They acted as tutors. They guided, adjusted, tuned. No worship existed. Only synchronization. The ridge of the Atlantic jutted like a spine through the ocean, and there, where the air thinned but still hummed with the residual violet breath, the Proto-Atlantean tribes of Mu began to harden themselves. Their skin, once supple and luminous like the Lemurians, grew opaque, bronze and slate-colored, catching whatever faint electrical charge lingered in the air. As tall as the trees of Mu, opaque-skinned, heavy-boned, and dense like living marble, these people carried themselves differently. The Atlanteans moved through the charged atmosphere like conductors in a grand orchestra. They learned to trap the pulse of the earth, not within their own bodies, but inside the stone they carved, the towers they raised, the circuits they forged. Each step calculated, each breath a note, each glance a chord in a symphony of stone, water, and air. Where Mu had spread its energy freely through mud pools and mineral waters, Atlantis sought control. Pools were replaced by stone basins, their waters still, charged by ley wires that ran like veins beneath the city. The first amplifiers rose from the ridges, six-sided quartz towers wrapped in copper and gold, feeding the constant hum of energy into the stone cities. In these towers, the earth's breath became the property of the Atlanteans, no longer a shared pulse but a network of controlled force. The people adapted quickly. Their muscles grew dense and taut, their movements precise. They wore metallic fabrics woven with silver and gold threads, stiff and capacitive, helping their bodies catch whatever energy remained. Food became necessary. They engineered dense crops, eating to fuel themselves instead of absorbing the mineral breath from their surroundings. Scarcity arrived, and with it, hierarchy. Close to the towers, power and strength flowed. Farther away, weakness followed. The Lemurian mud pools abandoned by the Atlanteans had hardened into memory. Artificial ventilation replaced the natural flow of air. Crystal towers, copper coils, and ley wires redirected the Earth's energy to serve Atlantean will, rather than the planetary pulse. The subtle thrum of internal charge flowing through the bone, soil, and fiber could be felt through the ground, trapped like a river in glass. The cities themselves were monuments to sound and light. Buildings were carved from fused stone, softened with acoustic resonance, and joined seamlessly as if poured into shape. Water moved in spirals contained in conduits that swirled endlessly, alive with energy and sound. Crystal bridges arched across the rings of the capital, glowing from the internal currents of the earth itself. Atlantean crafts slid along the ley paths, vessels of mercury-based metal held solid by magnetic fields, gliding over land and sea, without oars, without sails. Every guild, the waters, the stone, the sky, was a school of mastery. Every life a pursuit of perfection in controlling the world around them. And yet, even in its brilliance, there was a fracture. The more they mastered, the more they drifted from the world that had birthed them. These Atlanteans could no longer feel the pulse of the planet, their nervous systems hardened by heavy metals. Mud pools and mineral-fed seas were no longer necessary. The soft pulse of the earth could be replaced by crystal and wire, vibration and sound. Their bodies, once attuned to the planetary heartbeat, became insulated, solid, independent. The city of Atlantis rose in concentric rings, each layer a pulse of purpose. From the outer ring, the hum of spiraling water-filled canals greeted the traveler, a continuous loop of spinning, living currents. Towers of fused stone, edges smoothed to impossible precision, glinted in the violet light, catching the charged atmosphere and bending it into warmth. Here, stone was alive. Stone remembered. It whispered the history of the builders who manipulated it into obedience. Every block was moved not with muscle, but with song. Hundreds of Atlanteans would circle a quarry site, humming deep bass notes that vibrated through the plateau itself. Stones, 50 tons or more, hovered and drifted across the earth, guided by the gentle push of a tuning rod. Unexpected wobbles from the floating blocks drew bursts of laughter. A stone rolling just enough to graze a foot produced a small electrical jolt and a chorus of exclamations, reminders that even perfection could be playful. Mastery was serious, but life had not lost its sparkle. Inside the fused towers, corridors spiraled like living shells. Walls hummed faintly with stored energy. The memory stones sat in alcoves, massive quartz blocks etched with light beam rubies. Atlanteans placed their hands, hummed the right frequency, and they would see, hear, and feel the city's construction unfold, as though it was happening before their very eyes. They could step beside the original levitators and tuning circles. Knowledge didn't need to be taught. It flowed directly into the nervous system. A pulse, a memory, a living story. Outside the city, the ridge stretched across the horizon, jagged and magnificent. Geometric trees stood tall. Glass oaks reached skyward in perfect pentagons, their bark refracting light into violet and gold. Water ran in perfect spirals, energy channeled through canals in the same fluid rhythm. The Atlanteans, in all their polished perfection, had traded the openness of Mu for mastery over the environment. Their bodies became heavier, denser, and their connection to the planetary pulse muted. And yet, in their work and play, there was still joy, still wonder. Each building, each canal, each floating ship was a testament not just to power, but to a playful spirit and an abundance of curiosity. Despite this, beneath the laughter, the perfection, and the hum of the piezoelectric stone, there was the faintest glimmer of tension, the whisper of a memory that some things are meant to be felt, not mastered. The Atlanteans were learning that control had a cost, and somewhere in the shadows, the architects watched. They were not Atlanteans nor Lemurians. They were something older, a separate evolved species, and their fascination with control would one day become a threat that neither civilization could ignore. Chapter 3. Life in Atlantis was organized like a living machine, and everyone had a place in the hum. Guilds were the arteries of the city. The Guild of Waters, the Guild of Stone, the Guild of Sky, and countless smaller circulatory networks that kept energy, labor, and joy flowing. One could smell the difference immediately upon entering a guild hall. The Waters Guild's chambers smelled of warm minerals and wet stone. The Sky Guild's hall faintly of ozone and violet air. The Stone Guild smelled of resin, metal, and a hint of static electricity that made one's hairs stand on end. Children ran through the halls, their small hands pressing against memory stones to read the playful instructions left by their teachers. One boy giggled as a block of basalt hummed a welcome, vibrating against his fingertips like a purring cat. A young girl tilted her head to listen, and the stone projected the blueprint of a bridge before her eyes, its spiral paths bending with impossible geometry. glowing faintly from the internal energy of the crystal lattice. Every Atlantean carried the weight of their guild's purpose in their bodies. The water guilders moved like dancers, precise and fluid, guiding spiraling currents through the city's canals. Their arms curved like the arcs of water they controlled, sending drops to float and hover in the violet air, until the gilder whispered the frequency to let them fall perfectly back into place. The stone gilders were statuesque, giant hands adjusting floating blocks, guiding them into place with nothing but sound and subtle shifts of vibration. The sky gilders, meanwhile, hummed into massive, horn-like devices that directed the violet atmosphere. They created currents across the city that made the air itself a medium for energy transfer. Laughter and joy reverberated through the city. The little bits of mischief gave Atlantis its human pulse. Occasionally, a levitated block would drift too far and land with a gentle plunk in the canals, sending fish scattering away in tiny electrical sparks. Someone would curse under their breath in the Atlantean way, their exasperation bringing bursts of laughter from the surrounding crowd. Even the masters of their guilds, tall and gleaming, couldn't resist grinning at the chaos of energy obeying gravity imperfectly. Chapter 4. Beneath the sunlit spires of Atlantis, in the cold, mineral-rich depths of the ocean trenches, life moved differently. The ethereal mariners called these cities home. Their skins, smooth and damp like velvet, glimmered faintly with the electricity within the surrounding waters. They moved with purpose, like currents given form, their long limbs and fins guiding the dense, gel-like water through spiraling towers of pearlescent calcium that they had grown themselves. The towers were alive, not built. Proteins secreted into the mineral broth hardened into elegant spirals and hollow chambers, pressure balanced to withstand the crushing weight of the ocean above. The corridors pulsed with a soft, phosphorescent glow from the mineral-charged water, reflecting off the ethereal mariners' bioluminescent eyes. Every movement of the hand or tail sent ripples of light and sound through the city, a subtle symphony that only the trained or attuned could hear. Leviathans glided past these towers, massive as mountains, their capacitor-like skin gathering the electrical tension of the planet itself. When one breached the surface, a gentle arc of violet energy leapt into the air, sending a shiver through both ocean and sky. Humor existed here, subtle as a current. A young ethereal mariner's apprentice would sometimes squirt a swirl of mineral water at an elder, who would respond by twisting a tower slightly, sending the spray back like a playful counterpoint. Laughter, or its aquatic equivalent, bubbled through the trenches. It was a civilization that understood its world as a living circuit, and joy was simply part of the flow. The smokers, volcanic vents in the trenches, were the lifeblood of the abyssal cities. The ethereal mariners lived near them, guiding heat into the ocean and ensuring that the violet energy of the sky above could pass through the gel-like seas efficiently. These vents hissed and roared like musical instruments, and the webbed hands of the ethereal mariners moved through the water as if conducting an orchestra. Every vent was a classroom, a laboratory, and a cathedral at once. The heat of the vent created pulses of mineral-rich water, and the citizens learned to ride these pulses as dolphins ride waves, twisting and spiraling through the currents with grace and precision. To touch the water here was to feel the pulse of the planet itself, warm, electric, alive. Chapter 5. It began subtly at first. The ethereal mariners noticed strange new beings in their waters. Taller than any of their kind, these architects moved in rigid, deliberate arcs, exuding authority. They were not like the Atlanteans, not like Mu's soft and organic citizens. The architects were angular, symmetrical, and deliberate in their gestures. They built machines that hummed a steady, intrusive frequency through the water, forcing the leviathans to adjust their paths and the towers to bend slightly. The architects promised efficiency. They promised mastery. And like a current redirected into a narrower channel, the natural pulse of the deep world began to falter. The first subtle changes appeared. Water no longer flowed as freely. Towers grew denser, and the violet pulse of energy overhead dimmed slightly. By the time the Atharo mariners realized what was happening, the architects had begun their slow work of extraction and redirection. Energy was no longer shared freely with the planet. It was funneled to structures above and to the architects themselves. Even the leviathans seemed to hesitate mid-swim, unsure of how to respond to the new interference. The Atlanteans, initially unaware, began to mimic some of the architects' techniques in their stone labs. They dug basins and tried to recreate the pools of Mu. The water shimmered, but it was wrong. Heavy, still, cold. Despite every effort, something essential had been taken, and the Atlanteans' first real experience of loss, the wrongness, was born. Children born in these labs no longer shivered with the planet's pulse. They were solid state, physically perfect but disconnected, their senses dulled to the electric hum beneath their feet. This was the first step in the great betrayal. Life, once a part of the earth, was now being managed, harvested, and redirected. The architects smiled silently, letting the Atlanteans take the first step towards severing themselves from their natural connection. And that's it for today. Thank you for joining me for Echoes of My Imagination. My name is Tracy Lee. Don't forget to share, like, follow, and subscribe, and tell your friends. And join me next time for part 2 of The Lost Currents of Atlantis and Mu.